So they might have some,
All right, so we'll get started. Thank you for coming to ACM. Seems like everybody's busy today, so we don't have a lot of attendance, but that's all right. We're going to start with an opening prayer. Would anybody like to volunteer to do that? Anybody? Yes? Thank you.
Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for this day, and we're thankful for the opportunity to meet here as the Association for Computer Machinery here at BYU-Idaho. We're thankful for this building to meet in, and we're thankful for Brother Helfrich and all the many others who are going to instruct us today. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so just general stuff. We've got some upcoming events I'm really excited to share with you all. And we don't have a Clearwater info session. I need to update this slide. Sorry about that. And we'll get started. So, it is the Technical Interview Marathon week. Well, actually, it's now 2 weeks. We don't have a video game company. We plan to have that, but we weren't able to secure the instructor for that. The sign-ups are available at Sister Price's desk. Right now, I think there's only 3 people that are signed up. There are limited slots. Like, there isn't a lot of time that the faculty is able to give to this kind of a thing. So we worked really hard and negotiated and got some slots available. So you sign up there, first come, first serve. There's one person that's crossed out, so you can just fill in. That's fine. All right, so we're going to have Brother Helfrich today talk about doing a technical interview. So anyway, now we got some events that I want to talk to you. CodeSpace is not happening this week because it's 4th of July weekend, and we figured that everybody wants to be able to go and have a long weekend and get started early. So we aren't going to do that this week, but next week we will because we have one more Steam gift card to get rid of. Is that one still streaming? Yeah, it is. All right, the next thing is we have a LAN party that we're planning to do on the 15th. And I'm getting posters made, although I have to get them revised because you wouldn't be able to see the date with the way that the printer works. And bring your own gear. It's going to be a lot of fun. All the details are here. If you've got like a giant desktop PC rig that you want to show off because you're so awesome, then go ahead and bring it, including the screens, keyboards, mice, speakers, power strips, all that stuff. It's going to happen in a little theater. We booked that room. And we got it for, from 7:30 to 11:30, so we got quite a bit of time set aside for this, and we're going to have food, drinks, and stuff. And on top of that, that's actually the after party to this. So we're going to have a spring semester party because it's the end of the semester, and we figured that it's a great time for us to socialize and get it all out before we actually have to go through, the despair of going to the testing center and so on. So if you just go over there during the end of the semester, it just is oozing with that, atmosphere. Yeah?
So if it rains, will there be a backup location or something?
Good question. Right now we don't have a backup location.
It says prepare to get wet. So.
Yeah, it does say that. The reason why it says prepare to get wet, we're planning to play Capture the Flag, but with a little enhancement. We're going to have water balloons. And you have to, tag people out with the water balloons instead. And it's July. It should be really hot, right? So that's the expectation. We're going to have a lot of great food there. I've invited all the faculty to be there. So I'd love it if you guys could come. And I'd love it if the faculty could market this thing or at least announce it in all their classes again and again and again, because then people can actually come to it and we're not wasting our breath and time. That'd be really good. All right, so John Olkelberry's not here. He is working on getting us one last speaker because I think next week we don't have anything scheduled for ACM except for the ongoing interview marathon, and that's about it. We've got a lot of preparations to put into for just the parties and stuff that we're working on with the rest of the departments, societies here, so that's what's going on. But we're planning to get something at the end of on the week of the parties. That would be fun, probably game related, something like that. Projects and activities, Doug isn't here, but yeah, I pretty much covered what he would say. Online committee?
So because of July 4th, that's always really confusing. We are gonna have our meeting next Wednesday, on the 6th. Still same time, 5 o'clock in room 212. We are gonna be finalizing just the main designs of the website. And look out for a link on Slack. I'm gonna send out a survey. We received some entries into the logo design contest, so we'll start voting on those.
From one person.
From
Come on,
one
guys.
person.
It's a contest. You're gonna get stickers, hopefully, if it gets done soon enough. So, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right.
We're good.
Okay, they're done. Code Challenge Committee, Alan.
Not going on this week.
Nothing going on this week, like we said. And oh yeah, our secretary, he had his baby this week. So congratulations to Silver! Yay! He's not here because of that. So that's what's going on. I'll turn the time over to Brother Helfrich.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so you finally got a job interview. You've flown out on site. You're speaking with someone who could potentially be your coworker or your boss. It's high stakes. If you pass, you get, multi-tens of thousands of dollars salary. If you fail, you go home, you get to try again. So it's kind of a nerve-wracking moment, right? There's a lot of stress. So my job over the next 45, 50 minutes is to maximize the chance that you walk away with an offer in hand, okay? So that's kind of where we're going to talk about here. So essentially there's 4 things you have to establish during this interview. Number 1 is you're qualified. Number 2, you're social. Number 3, you're smart. And number 4, you're methodical. Okay, so you're qualified, your resume should pretty much establish that. And as a matter of fact, you're probably not going to get the interview unless you're qualified. They might ask you a few questions to see if your resume is a lie, but as long as it's not a lie, I wouldn't really worry about that. Don't try to spend all your time establishing you're qualified. Your resume should already do that. The second thing you need to identify is that you're social, that they actually want you to be their coworker, because that's essentially what they're going to ask. Do they want them to have the office next to you? They want them to pop by your office, a couple times a day to chat. Do they want to work with you on something, right? And so you got to come across as nice, which means you got to lie. Just kidding. You got to be pleasant. You got to be witty, right? You got to not induce stress. So if you are completely stressed out during the interview, they are going to be stressed out being next to you, which means they're not going to want to work with you. So it's kind of tricky because this is a stressful situation, but you got to come across not being stressful. Okay? So a couple things you can do about that is to be relaxed, is to be excited when they give you a problem, not stressed out, right? Like they say, hey, I have a problem for you. You're like, oh, great, okay, I can't wait to hear this one, because they want people to be as excited about their job as they are, okay? But I'm not going to really spend too much time talking about that. Next, they need you to be smart, okay? So if you spend your whole time trying to be smart, you're going to come across as not very smart. The trick to coming across as smart is, for the most part, be yourself, but only once, maybe twice in the hour, do you have to impress them, okay? This is not something you can plan for, but it's definitely something you can screw up by trying too hard, okay? So a lot of people spend the whole time trying to be clever. Don't do it. But if you find a clever solution, highlight it and say, hey, look, here's a neat thing I found. And then describe it. And they're like, oh, yeah, that is pretty clever. And you check out that smart bit. So qualified, not a whole lot you can do about that. Social, the ways you can screw it up, not a whole lot you can do about it. Smart, there's the ways you can screw it up, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I'm going to spend the vast majority of our time talking about this, how to be methodical. This is something you can practice for. This is something you can prepare for, and it will make a gigantic difference on the interview. There are people who are qualified, social, and smart, but are not able to establish this and don't get the job. And there's people who are borderline qualified, borderline social, borderline smart, but super methodical, and they often get the job. So I'm going to spend all my time talking about this. Okay? Any questions before we go on to this? Okay. So there are, for a software engineer, there are 3 basic jobs that you get. Okay? One is a developer. Another one is a tester. And the last one is a program manager. Okay? When you walk into that interview, you should know which job you're interviewing for. As a matter of fact, the recruiter should know which job you're interviewing for. Okay? The developer's job is to turn the spec into code and to fix bugs. This is a technical job, it's a programming job, right? There's some design involved, of course. The tester's job is to find defects but not fix them. Okay? The program manager's job is to come up with the design and is to manage the process. But they don't write code and they don't find defects. These three job titles have very, very, very different interview questions, and they're evaluated in very, very, very different ways. Which one should we talk about first?
Developer, because
Developer.
Yeah.
That good? Because why?
Well, developer is probably one of the more common ones we're going to encounter. Also, the project manager is probably very overarching.
So, 40% of you, statistically speaking, will get a developer job. 40% of you get a tester job, and 20% of you get a program manager job. And our university tracks the industry average. So it's actually not the most common. And not only that, these people get paid just as much as these, but more people apply for these jobs. So if you want to get your foot in the door, testing, quality assurance, verification, validation actually is the way to go. But, it really depends on what your interests are and what your skills lie. Yeah.
Does one get paid more over the other?
Nope, they're all about peers.
Okay.
Now, sometimes an organization doesn't respect testing and doesn't pay them enough, but I wouldn't want to work in that organization in any capacity, because an organization that doesn't do a good job testing doesn't do good products. Yeah, McAllister.
Do you find it hard to transfer from testing to development if you start there? You get kind of shoved into the role and then only thought of as that?
That's a really good question. In general, it's difficult to change between the roles, period. Now, if you have an internship as a tester, then it does not limit your chance of having a job as a developer or a programmer. But in general, it's difficult to do. I started as a developer, and then I transitioned into a program manager, and there was definitely a lot of skepticism on that, for sure. So I had to prove that I had project management capabilities, I had design capabilities, as well. I didn't have to prove I had technical chops because I came from a developer. But those are the three things you have to establish as a program manager, and I'll talk about those when we do that interview in just a second. Okay. Other questions about these three roles? Yeah.
So does that mean the program manager has experience in both developer and testing fields?
That's a very good question, and the answer is no. The program manager has to be knowledge of the technology involved, but more importantly, they have to be knowledgeable about the product, about the market, about the users, about how the budget, time, schedule constraints, stuff like that. But they don't actually write code, they have to be knowledgeable of code. Furthermore, they have to know about risks to quality, but they don't actually have to find defects. The defects are found by the testers.
Yeah. And do the project managers get paid more than testers and developers?
As a general rule, the answer is no, they don't. These all get paid the same in a typical organization, although some organizations are different, I understand that. However, most testers, they like the technology, and they don't want to be more than a second level manager. There are exceptions. Most developers like the technology, and they don't want to get promoted to the level where they don't get to write code anymore.
Yeah.
So they very seldom get to be on a third level manager. Program managers like managing stuff, and so they tend to gravitate towards the higher echelons of an organization. Steve Jobs, program manager. Paul Allen, program manager. Steve Ballmer, program manager. Bill Gates, developer. It's fairly rare. And I can't think of a tester that's made it to the top. It could happen. They just don't want to usually because they like the technology. Other questions about these three roles? Okay. All right, so let's start with the developer interview. Okay, so the developer interview was talking about how to be methodical about it. They're going to give you a problem, and they're going to ask you to solve it. Okay? Usually the problem comes in one of three varieties. Number one is a clever trick problem to see if you have generic problem-solving skills. Sometimes involves philosophers eating dinner and chopsticks or crazy stuff like that. You know, this typical discrete math kind of stuff. I don't like those interviews because they don't really show whether you know how to write code. I would never give an interview like that. And one time I was given an interview question like that, and I said, what does this have to do with writing code? Guys, it's a good point, and he gave me a second one. So I personally, I don't like those, and you can't really prepare for those trick questions anyway. Another kind of one is, are you a no hire? Are you not qualified to be here? And they'll ask you for an example, can you implement string length? And if you can't answer that crisply, then you failed the interview. So you should always be prepared for a CS124 or CS165 style question, and be very crisp about it, 5 minutes, 10 minutes max, just blow through it. If you're a qualified programmer, that shouldn't be a problem. They're trying to weed out the people who shouldn't be there. But the interesting ones, the 40-minute questions, are often problems you can't solve in 40 minutes, and they know it. And sometimes they have a trick in it, and they want you to find it. Okay? So I'll give you an example of my favorite interview question. Imagine you have a function called void word wrap. The tag takes a pointer to a character as a parameter. Okay? And its string can be very long. And you want to replace white spaces with new line characters so that it wraps on the screen. Okay? How would you do that? Okay? Typical question. Now, I like this question because most people can't solve it in 40 minutes, but they get pretty far. And I like it also because there's a couple ways you can extend it if you want to make them really, see if they're really clever. Like, can you handle proportional width fonts or settable tab characters or stuff like that. So anyway, this was actually the final question that was given to me at Microsoft, and I gave it to probably 100 people through the years, so I know this question really well. Okay, so you're given a problem like this. It's a hard problem. So to be methodical, you want to demonstrate that you can solve any hard problem. So what I do is I say, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. Number one, I'm going to understand the problem. Number two, I'm going to look for corner cases. Number three, I'm going to design a solution. Number four, I'm going to verify it. And number five, I'm going to write the code. Now, here's the thing. Just because he gave me a problem like that doesn't mean I know what he's looking for. They might want to see if I'm really good at testing my code. They might want to see if I know the mechanics of writing code. They might want to check my design skills. They might even be giving me a social question, and they don't care about the solution. I don't know what they're looking for, and it could be any one of these things. And the worst thing you can do is answer the wrong question, and they will happily say no hire and kick you out of the office so they can go back doing what they really rather do, which is write code. It's true. For an example, one time I was getting an interview question, and I was told it was a technical question, a technical interview, right? I said, okay, and they asked me the question, what does a semicolon do in Linux? I mean, it was Unix at the time. And I said, a semicolon, I assume you mean the shell, because, well, it's actually written in C, and semicolon means end of statement, but I assume you mean the shell. And semicolon allows you to put multiple commands on one line, but there's many shells you can do, so I don't know which shell you're talking about. That was a technically correct answer. But it was actually a social interview, and they wanted to see if I was a little show-offy, a little bit nerdy. So I got the boot to the head, right? So you want to find out what kind of question they're going to ask, all right? So what I do is I literally write these things on the board, and I say, well, I can go through the entire process, or I can focus in one or two areas. What do you want me to do? Now, that may seem like cheating, because you're asking them to say, how am I going to be evaluated? It's not being cheating. You're being methodical. Okay? And they're going to say, oh, listen, I really want you to focus on the design aspect. You're like, oh, okay, I could do that. Then focus your time on it. Or they could say, run through the whole process or whatever. Another nice thing about this methodology is they're going to be thinking about their job while they're interviewing you, because their job is more interesting than talking to you. So they're going to be daydreaming and checking their email and doing whatever while you're sitting there on the board writing stuff, right? And so every now and then they check back to see how you're doing. And if you say, yes, I've done this step, this step, this step, they know exactly where you are and they can pick up and it looks like you know what you're doing. Where if you just have a whole bunch of code on the board, and they're like, well, did he just make that up? Or I don't know what he's done in the last 10 minutes. So you want to help them not make a mistake so you can get what you need out of the interview. And what you need out of the interview is a job. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is my method. You come up with your own. Okay? You figure out what steps you want to do and make sure they make sense to you. If they ask you to explain the steps, then you can tell them. And this is how I do it. First of all, you want to understand the problem. So I'm going to work through it by hand a few times. Okay? As if I am the computer. And then once I understand it, then I'm going to say, okay, is there any, and that's my first step, understanding the problem. The second step is the corner cases. Is there anything I need to watch out for? What if the string is empty? What if the word is bigger than the length of the line? What if, there's nothing but spaces? How do I word wrap that? So I'm going to look for all those corner cases one at a time. And the thing is, I'm not going to get them all, but I'll get a few. And then I'm going to go through the design, and I'll use whatever design technique is convenient. Flowchart, pseudocode, structure chart, UML class diagram, data flow diagram, I don't know. I will use some sort of representation to draft out the design. Okay? And then once I'm pretty sure about that, I'll check my design against my corner cases to make sure that I have everything covered. And then I'm confident that I can begin writing the code. And then I'll write the code, and I'll do the best I can using whatever language I'm most convenient with, right? For an example, if I'm most comfortable with C++ and they ask for Java, I say, well, I can struggle through Java, or I can nail C++, it's up to you. But I haven't done Java in 2 or 3 years. So make sure to tell them what language you're familiar with, and they should let you use whatever language you want. Okay? So this is an example of a methodology to handle a developer interview. If you walk in with that in your pocket and know how to use it, you're going to nail the methodical part of the interview. And then all you have to worry about is being clever once, being social, and looking like you know what you're doing, being qualified. Questions about that? Questions? Questions? Yes?
So you're saying, like, for those big questions, even if you don't ever actually finish it, but as long as I've seen you going through these steps so thoroughly and cleverly, then that's good.
They almost never see you finish it. But see, the thing is, what you want to establish is that given enough time, given enough resources, you can solve the problem. And better yet, given enough time, given enough resources, you can solve any problem. That's what they really want to know. I mean, you can come up with the solution, but not convince them you're methodical and you will fail. Or you can be methodically going through the problem, chicken away at it one step at a time, bink, 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 run out of time, and they're like, oh, wait, they'll solve it, I'm sure, with time. And that's what you really care about, right? Don't focus on the solution, focus on the way you solve it. Yes?
I imagine you've been the interviewer, right?
Yeah.
So is this what people normally do? The people that you normally just come across? Is this,
Some people do a good job describing where they are orally, and that's okay. Some people, they do the design over here, they do their code over here, they verify over here, and I can follow what they're doing. But the thing that distinguishes a good interviewer from a poor one is the ability to visually show their progress, so that the interview person, the person who's conducting the interview, will not make a mistake. It doesn't matter which process you have as long as you can achieve that. But I like this method because it takes very little amount of board space, and it's easy for them to follow, right? Because I'm showing them my methodology. Therefore, I am methodical. Give them no place to screw up, right? But yeah, this is just one of many techniques. And yes, I did steal it from a candidate who did a particularly good job. And I think I've conducted about 100 interviews. So I've seen quite a few before. Okay. Other questions? Okay. All right, which one should we do next? Tester, developer, program manager? Tester, okay. Tester interviews are strange. First of all, because testers write more code than developers. Most people don't know that, but it's true. See, what you typically do as a tester is you're going through your test cases, you find a defect, you're like, aha, there's a bug, right? And then you describe the bug in a bug report, you send it off, and when they fix it, you take that bug and you write some automation to test that case forevermore. So every time you go to bed at night, you say, go. When you come in the next morning, you have your 10,000 tests that ran, you have 100 tests that failed, and you can investigate which ones failed and why. All right? Now, of those 100 failures, usually 90 of them are false positives. In other words, there's a lot of defects in your testing code, but you don't care. You don't mind false positive. You just want to write as many tests as possible the smallest amount of time. So these people don't write nearly the same quality of code as these people, but they write a larger volume of code. Okay? So they will test your technical chops a bit. They're not going to ask you really hard questions like these, but they might. But they'll probably ask you some basic programming questions. They want to see if you're applying for a testing job without the programming chops. Okay? And then they'll come up with a big testing question. And the big testing question is almost always the same. It's almost always the same variety. The interviewer will look around his table, find something that, oh, yeah, I'll take this, a pen. How would you test this pen? Okay? Now, once again, they're looking to see if you're social and competent and smart and
Methodical.
want to know if you're methodical, right? So you got to come up with a methodical way to test the pen or the your earbud or this book or that lunch pail or whatever other thing, physical thing they hand to you. Okay? So let me show you how to do that. You say, okay, pen. Okay, there is the ink. And there is the physical container. And there is the ergonomics. And there's something else I haven't thought of yet. The cap, sure. Okay, so when we talk about the ink here, I care about the color, I care about the volume, I care about the drying. I care about its permanence. I care about how it erases. Okay, so if I was doing this for real, it would take me a long time to come up with all the different properties of ink. But right now I'm just showing them that I'm methodical about the way that I'm thinking about it, okay? And then I'll say, okay, drying, I care about how long until it's totally dry. I care about how it dries when I write fast. I care about how does it work after 5 seconds? Is it mostly dry or just a little bit dry or whatever? Okay, so you go through this whole thing here, okay? And pretty soon you get to the point where you can't think of more than one property of how fast it dries. You're right here. Or how about the volume? You know, okay, I care about how. Okay, let's do that one. How long I can write? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to fill this out a bit here just to show them I know what I'm doing, right? And maybe I can be clever, right? And if I get my one clever point in, I'm good. Yes, I got a clever point in. Look, I'm clever. Okay. Okay. Now that I got to the leaf level thing here, I want to create an experiment that will collect data to support or refute the assertion that this can write a long time. Okay? I want to create an experiment. Now, right now I'm talking about the physical world. In the software world, sometimes it's a little more straightforward, but still we want to create an experiment. So a tester is essentially a scientist. Okay? And when you create an experiment, there's 3 things you care about. Validity, reliability, and efficiency. Okay? Validity. Am I collecting data to answer the right question? If I want to know how long it can write, I'm not going to throw it against the wall and see if the pen breaks. That's not going to tell me anything about how well it writes. So we want to make sure it's on target. Reliability is what are the chances I'm going to get the same measurement twice in a row. Okay? How much noise is there in the measurement? Now, I can have something that's reliable but not valid. Yes, it always breaks when we hit the wall. Doesn't tell me anything about what I'm doing, right? Or I can have something that's valid but not reliable. I'm gonna give it to my daughter and I'm gonna have her write all day long and I'm gonna see how long it takes her to finish it, right? Well, yes, she will write all day long, but sometimes she'll set it down for an hour. So that will give me a very skewed data. And efficient, how much energy is it going to take for me to collect this measurement? How much time, how much effort, how much code am I going to have to write? And if I could figure it out in 100 years, I don't care. I need to figure it out in a small amount of time, right? So I want to create an experiment that's valid, reliable, and efficient. So I'm going to say, okay, I can create an experiment for any one of these things. Which would you like for me to do? Now, you could say that and you sound pretty impressive because you're showing some confidence, right? But if you're particularly clever about one of them, say, oh, I will show you this one, because now I get to get my clever point. Only need one, okay? Okay, so I'm going to show you my clever point of how to tell how long I can write, okay? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to hold the pen down and I'm going to walk for a very long time. Now, what I need is a very, very, very big whiteboard. Maybe a mile or two. So this will be valid. It'll show me how long, because I can measure until I have my first gap. It'll be reliable. It will almost always show me the same thing, but it won't be terribly efficient. So I'll tell you what I'll do instead. I will create a drum of whiteboard material, and I'll hold the pen against it, and I'll spin it. And I'll tell me how many revolutions I have, and that'll tell me how long it writes. Okay? As a matter of fact, I could spin it really fast. In fact, I can have the computer do it. So now it's valid. I'm measuring how much ink comes out. It's reliable. I get the same measurement every time. And it's efficient. Once I build my experimental apparatus, I can tell you very little effort how much ink is in this thing. Okay? And that's what we're looking for. If you create experiments for every single one of these, then, and here's the key point, I can convince this person that, given enough time and energy, I can find every defect in that pen. And if you can convince them of that, you got yourself a job. Now, you can see testing is a very creative process, and it's very fun. And you get to think like in a very kind of sadistic way sometimes. But, and so I want to emphasize, this is a fun job, right? And then what you do after you create this called a test plan, after you create this test plan, then it takes about, for a 2-year cycle, it takes about 6 months to create a full test plan. Then you execute these one at a time by hand. And then once the bugs come back, you write the automation to make sure it never comes back again. And when you're finished, you have automation for your entire test plan. And then someone says, hey, I got a brand new pen. You're like, okay, click. I'm going to go home now. And you'll come back and you have a complete test. And that's what testers do. Okay? Questions about passing a tester interview? Okay, yeah?
Will they be the same length as an interview for a developer job?
Yeah. 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 Uh-huh.
How many students from this university become testers?
Usually 40%.
Just like on the board?
The ratio is very, very similar to the industry average.
I've heard from some people that more students become testers from this program than others. So.
I'm seeing 40%.
Okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately, of the 120 credits it takes for you to graduate, assuming you don't waste any, only about 1 credit is devoted specifically to testing. And that is in CS 416, the second half of that class is verification and validation. We're rectifying that, by the way. We're trying to make it a full 3 credits on different methodologies for white box, black box, unit testing, ad hoc testing, all these different methodologies. But we're working on that. But yeah. Yes?
How do you handle the question, what do you think you missed?
Oh, if they ask me what I missed here, I'll say, good question. Do I have my categories? And then I'll brainstorm at that level. And, oh, yeah, you know what? I think I might be another one up here. And if you have the whole matrix, it's called a matrix. It's a tree, but it's called a test matrix. If you have the whole matrix printed on the board, then you can debug it and find missing components. And just like if you have your methodology written on the board here, they say, hey, what'd you miss? Here's the corner cases I hit, then I missed one. And so that's the nice thing about having things written out. Phone interviews are really hard to do because you can't write it. But that's how to answer that one. Okay, yeah?
Can you go into project management?
Yes, that's our last one. You ready? Last question? Okay. Project management, these ones are very social. They want us, yes.
Well, how much do they get paid in comparison to yours?
The same.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay.
They usually have more promotion opportunities because they tend to be able to manage people better. But yeah, the same. Good. Depending on your organization. You gotta always caveat that. For example, some organizations, this is not an entry-level position. You do it after you've been a tester developer for a while. I don't trust those because they do different types of things, and I prefer it if they hired you with those specific skills in mind. But yeah, it's the same. Okay, program manager. They're going to really hit you on the social stuff. They're going to say, hey, can you tell me a situation where one member of your team wasn't pulling their weight? What did you do? So you should really, really have those types of interview questions nailed. But those are just the appetizer, right? Then they're going to come up with a big question. And the big question is very similar to what I'm about to give you, okay? It's a hard question. It's a hard question. So imagine, and this was given to me, imagine that you worked at an office supply company, a factory that has 200 employees, and it's in a little tiny town that has 1,000 people in it, okay? So basically the entire town supports the factory. It's a one-shop town, okay? If the factory fails, everyone loses their job. It's catastrophic. Now, there is one program manager in this factory, and that is you. Congratulations, 1,000 people's income and livelihood weighs on your shoulders. And the boss says, we're going to enter the stapler market, okay? And your job is to come up with a brand new stapler that will make us wildly successful or bankrupt. I'm going to give you 2 weeks. Good luck on it. I'll be back. I'm on vacation. So the boss flies off to vacation, and you have to come up with a new stapler. What does that stapler look like? That's the question, okay? What does that stapler look like? What they're actually asking you is, what is the value proposition? What can you make out of a stapler that would make people want to buy it? Something that no one else has. Something that's exciting. And you got to come up with a design for this. And you got to come up with a way that you're going to make sure that the product gets built with the quality it needs at the time it needs and deal with problems that may arise. Yes?
So could you approach the question as in like asking your boss if that's really a good idea because these people could lose their jobs? Or
You're going to trust me? Don't do that.
maybe,
No.
Maybe we should just keep the market we're already doing good in instead of just
You could approach that, but that's not the question. Because they need you to be able to innovate in any situation. And that's what you need to show them. That you can innovate in any situation. Now, I will show you some examples of bad solutions, okay? One time, this lady said, and I remember exactly where I was standing when she showed this to me because I tried not to drop my jaw. She's like, well, okay, I think what we need to do is go for the child market because kids love the staple stuff. And kids love Bart Simpson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the Bart Simpson stapler. So there's his mouth right there, and this is what it will do. I said, wonderful. Can you please tell me? And so how you can make it? She's like plastic. I'm like, okay. Let's ignore the licensing problems here. Can you tell me 3 problems, or even just one problem with this design? She's like, no, it looks great. Sorry, Chris, what's the problem?
Using it as it's painful.
Yes, it's painful.
It's covered in spikes.
Ow! My hair's pokey. So she didn't figure that out, so she didn't get the job. Give me some ideas.
Well, like in the interview, would we be allowed to come up with like 10 different ideas?
Yeah, and you can evaluate each one of them. I say, oh, I go for this, but this is the pros, this is the cons, go for this one, the pros and cons. It would be best, though, if you would think about the problem for a while and then say, well, there's a couple different angles I can go on it. I can go for, marketing, or I can go for this or that, and then start shooting ideas at them. Now, by the way, this actually happened to someone. This was actually someone's job to come up with a better stapler. Because it turned out Staples, the office supply company, wanted to have a flagship stapler And then they asked a designer to come up with a new design. And what they came up with is actually rather ingenious. You push on it with one finger, I don't care if there's 100 sheets there. It makes a spring, load up, load up, load up, pow! One finger, you can staple 100 things. That was their value proposition. No one's ever done it before. I don't have to bang it, right? Here's another great solution. Okay, actually, this gentleman, he proposed this a really bad solution, and I was very polite to him, and then I was showing him out the door, and he said, wait, I got another idea. I'm like, what do you got? And he said, well, what if you put an RFID in the staples? So then you could just staple a single sheet of paper, put it in a cabinet, and then you could find your document. So it's not about attaching stuff, it's about finding stuff. I'm like, you got yourself a job, you know? And what impressed me about him was that he was so excited he wanted to tell me even though the interview was over. And it was a completely clean slate. Beautiful, beautiful job. Right? I had one lady come up with a fashion stapler where you put like little flowers or little butterflies or a company logo, and you can come up with your own thing to go on it. And so once again, it's more about decoration. That's how she's going to carve her market niche, as opposed to just fastening papers. Brilliant, brilliant, right? So that's the kind of things you're looking for. These interviews are all about creativity. Come up with something out of the blue, because that's what program managers do. Besides manage people and make sure you're on time, on budget, and the code. Okay. Okay. Questions about those 3 types of interviews? Now, make sure that you are in the right type of interview for the job you want. If you want to be a program manager and they're asking you a testing question, clarify. And if they say, oh yeah, this is a testing position, they're like, okay, I think there's a mistake. Can we talk to HR and reschedule these interviews? Don't waste their time, don't waste your time, and maybe you can get onto the right track the following day. I've definitely, at Microsoft, I've interviewed people before and realized they were interviewing for the wrong job. They didn't know it at the time, but based on their skills. And I shifted roles, asked them a different type of question. They answered it really well. I says, do you have an extra day? And I called the HR person. We need to hold on this person for one more day, and I rescheduled it. But it'd be way better if they knew ahead of time where they were going. Okay? Okay. Other questions? Yes?
Did they usually state what kind of job it is when you start the interview?
The HR person will say it, but if they don't, you clarify.
Okay.
Right? And then if you find out at 8 o'clock in the morning before the first interview that you're doing the wrong thing, then take corrective action right there. But also, if you're once again expecting these types of interviews and they're giving you these types of questions, then you can say, I'm sorry, I want to clarify, this is a tester position. They're like, yes, but our testers write a lot of automation. You're like, okay, I can handle that. And then you hope they start asking you tester questions later, too. Yes, Matthew?
Oh, I wanted to know if you could tell us more horror stories of what mistakes people have made, and that way we can navigate minefields.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Okay. There's several different levels of interviews you go through. The first one is a screener interview. Sometimes it's done by phone. Sometimes they come on campus and they have you for 15 minutes. Sometimes they do it informally. Some companies come here and then they have an informal little process where they pull aside you for a room and talk with you for 5 or 10 minutes. And then the next one, they might have another screener interview and then they do the fly out. So there's different levels. So one time I was applying for a job at Anderson Consulting. They do contract work for banks and large businesses and stuff like that. And a very well-known company, they pay a ton. And so I was, sure, I'll apply. So I threw my resume. Where I went to school, the company, about 50 companies a week would come and they would have job openings. And you come with a stack of resume every Monday, you look at the job, it counts, you give it a slot, put in a slot, so about 5 or 10 resumes per Monday. And so I put mine in Anderson's. And then a week later I got the interview, so I got my suit on, and I found a lot of my friends were sitting there waiting for the interview too. And instead of the usual half an hour first level interview, it was only 10 minutes. And it turns out that everybody who threw a resume got an interview. I'm like, all right. So I go in, I sit down, And the guy asked me a polite question. I give him a polite answer, and he says, "So, you're a big Phillies fan, aren't you?" His Phillies was the big baseball team in Philadelphia. I'm like, "Oh, really? Not really. I don't really follow baseball. It's not my sport." He said, "Oh, yeah, but they had this great second baseman named Kruk. What do you think of him?" I said, "Well, I heard about Kruk, but I don't really know much about him." And we talk, and pretty much the time is over. He thanks me very much, and I leave. And I thought, that's an odd interview. That's a really odd interview. They didn't ask me anything about my qualifications. We talked about baseball, and I know nothing about baseball. And I think I established that with clarity. So I was curious. So I waited in the lobby for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then another one of my friends came out and he said, "How'd you do?" And that guy said, "Oh, that was the worst interview ever." "Really? What happened?" "Well, the guy kept trying to talk about baseball, but I got him back on track." And several people kept saying that, and I noticed a trend. So I was really curious, so I spent half an hour, and I sat, 5 or 6 people came by, asked them what the interview was. They all said baseball. I'm like, huh. A week later, I get invited to the second round. But my friends did not. And it turns out that was not a technical interview at all. It was a social one, because they want to see if you're willing to talk to the client on their terms. And sometimes the client wants to talk about baseball. But if you keep trying to direct the conversation, you take charge where you shouldn't, you're going to screw it up. So remember who's in charge of the interview. It is the interviewer. Follow their cues. If they're like really intense, you got to be intense too. If they're really laid back, you got to be laid back too. You got to match their mood. You got to give them what they want, right? You got to help them not make mistakes, but you can't take charge. And that's a common mistake people make. Here's another mistake I made. It was a full day interview for GE, General Electric. They make locomotives, jet engines, and light bulbs. They make lots of stuff, right? And it turns out they have a large computer program. And went out to Stamford, Connecticut, and did an all-day interview and stuff. And I remember between my 4th and 5th interview, usually it's 6 interviews per day, I really had to go. So after my interview, I said, "I need to go to the bathroom." The guy brought me to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, and I sat there, and I washed my hands. No paper towel. Take some toilet paper. Okay. Okay. Walk out. Okay. "Hi, I'm your next interviewer." I'm like, "Hi." And my hand is cold and clammy, and maybe just a little bit moist. He recoiled visibly, because maybe he thought I peed in my hand. I don't know what. And then during the next hour of the interview, he kind of sat away from me. I don't think he listened to a thing I said. I think he was planning the seconds so he could wash his hands. So some things are beyond your control, but those impressions matter. How firm your handshake, eye contact, are you pleasant? You know, those little things matter, and sometimes they could really turn out. That guy's like, "I don't want him to work with me." So that was a big mistake I made. Oh, here's another mistake people make. Sometimes I take cues off the resume, not very often, and I take cues off the resume, and I say, "Oh, hey, interesting, you worked on this project. Can you tell me about it?" And they're like, "Yeah, that project, I really didn't do very well on it, and I didn't like it very much, but I finished it." I'm like, "Oh. Why do you have something on your resume you want to talk about?" Everything on your resume you should want to talk about. Everything in your resume, you should have a story associated with it that paints a different picture about who you are. You see? And so if there's a class you list that you hated, don't talk about how much you hated it. Talk about how much you overcame adversity, or that you learned this new thing, or that it taught you a new work ethic because you had to work 100 hours a week on it, or whatever else it was. But make sure you have a good story for everything on your resume, because that really turns you off immediately. So, okay. Other questions? Yes?
Are there topics we should avoid?
Oh, that's a good question. And Brother Twitchell, I wish he was here to answer this. He's one of our faculty, and he has a list of things you should avoid. And I will reflect his list, but I'm not going to reinforce it. You should not talk about gender. You should not talk about religion. You shouldn't talk about your marital status or your family. You should keep your personal stuff to yourself, right? In other words, you should be boring, but then they won't remember you, and that you're human, right? They won't like you. They gotta like you, right? So I'm going to temper that a little bit. Some people say don't put your mission on your resume. Put your mission on your resume. Say, hey, I volunteered 2 years of my life on my own dime to learn a different language and a different culture because it's something I stand for. They want to know that. They want to know you have, what's what I'm looking for. You stand for something. Yeah, whatever that word is. They want that. Also, say, how many times have you given a talk at sacrament meeting? A dozen? So list on there, given a dozen talks in front of 150 people that last anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. Most people can't do that. You want to talk about that. How many times you taught a class? Taught 30 classes to 15 people. Oh, no, it's just deacon's quorum. No, don't say that. The fact that you have given talks before or given lessons before says that you are comfortable in social situations most people aren't. And you take that for granted because you're members of the church and everyone around you has done the same thing. But that is rare. That is rare in the world. In the world, most employers care if you're going to show up to work drunk, if you're going to sleep with the secretary, if you're going to steal, or you're going to lie in your time card or your vacation time. That's what they're worried about. Right? When employers realize that members of the church don't have those concerns, they love us. And that's why some very weird organizations like USAA, they provide insurance for military personnel. They hire an inordinate number of our graduates because we are morally bound and social, and we don't cheat. So you got to say that somehow on your resume. And sometimes that means telling stories relating to church. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
If they ask if we have any questions, what types of questions should we be asking?
Good question. That is a fantastic question. And that's going to take the reign of my time because it's such a great question. Okay. You have a student debt, maybe a little one, but you have one. You have very little experience. You need money, and you might even be married. You are a beggar. So you'll take any job you can get.
Yeah.
That's
it's true.
Everything I said is not true. Because you have something they want. You have skills. You have time. You have ambition. You have energy. And not only that, there is a lot more jobs, jobs available than there are people who can fill them. In other words, you need to interview them as hard as they interview you. You got to get out of that beggar mentality because you are trusting them with your career. Are you sure you can do that? You know, just like if you're thinking about getting married, am I really going to trust the rest of my life with you? Well, let's see here. If you are a schizophrenic and a kleptomaniac and you deal meth on the side, maybe not, right? So don't get into that just because someone said yes, right? You got to be very careful who you're willing to commit to. And with your job, it is that way too. And there are many companies out there who are more than happy to work you to death for very little pay. Be cautious. Be cautious. So what you really want out of this interview is for both parties, the worker and the employer, to be equally happy. So think about your skills, your talents, your interests. Think about the needs of the employer, and if they match, everyone is happy. They get a lot of work out of you, you get a lot of pay out of them, advancement opportunities, you're satisfied with life, it's good. Okay? But now, let's imagine that some of your skills do not come to play. Then you're not getting paid what you're worth. Needs are not being met. You're fired. Okay? So you need to ask just as hard of questions of them as they ask of you. You want to know if you can trust them with your career. Okay? So have one or two hard-hitting questions in your pocket, and don't be afraid to ask them. Okay? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was contemplating coming to BYU-Idaho from Microsoft, okay? And I was concerned because they wanted me to get my PhD. And I knew that would be a lot of work. But I wasn't sure exactly how much work. So they asked me that question, do you have any questions for us? And they expect a very kind one, oh, what about the weather? Tell me about traffic. I don't want questions like that. So I looked at one of the people, right in the eye, and says, when you got your PhD, how long did it take you? He said, 6 years. And I said, how much disruption was it to your family and to your life to do that? And he says, there's basically 4 years of my kid's life that I don't remember. That's a hard-hitting question. That also tips the negotiation balance in my favor because they're asking me to get my PhD, right? So don't be afraid to ask the hard-hitting question. Ask them very specific things. When was the last time you worked past midnight? When was the last time that you worked more? They asked you to work more than 50 hours a week? When was the last time that you were not able to do your job because of technical limitations of the company? Their network went down, or the computers weren't fast enough, or the email server went down, or something like that, right? You want to get a feel for what it's like to work there, whether you can do it. When was the last time you got to do training to advance your skill set? Do you get to choose your own projects, or do they get specified for you? How much freedom do I have to choose my own technology, my own editor, my own work environment? Is that mandated, or do I get to choose it myself? Do you let me work it from home? Kind of questions like this. Ask the hard-hitting questions. And don't be satisfied with a surface answer. Dig, 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 because they are digging, digging, digging on questions they ask you.
When is it appropriate to ask how much you get paid?
How much they get paid? Never.
Or how much you will be getting paid as?
Good question.
As an employee?
Good question. When you are finished with the interview process, they may then issue an offer. At that point in time, you no longer need to establish that you are qualified for the job. You have to shift gears. And you got to go into offer negotiation mode. At that point in time, you can talk salary, but never before.
And so that's the stage when you ask all these hard-hitting questions?
No, I asked it during the interview process. Right, during the interview process, yes. Yeah, the offer negotiation phase is different. A common mistake people make is they don't realize they left the interview stage and got into the offer negotiation phase, and it should be different. So you got to behave a little differently then. Yes.
I was gonna say, I've been asked that question when it was just like an interview.
What is that? What's the question?
How much are you expecting to be paid?
Oh, good, good. And what do you say?
Well, one of the jobs was it wasn't an internship kind of a job, so I just told them. But on an internship kind of a job,
Yeah.
I'm never really sure what to do.
Good. So there's no good way to answer that question. There's no good way. So here's the deal. You can give them a number, and if it's too high, that's the end of the conversation. If it's too low, they'll give it to you. Okay? There's no good way to answer it.
The
Okay?
price is right.
Yeah.
It also goes that way for some job applications that you fill out, that they
Yep.
want to know what kind of pay that you're expecting.
Yep, yep. And
It's so
don't
frustrating.
answer it.
If you can.
Don't answer it, right? And so this is what you do. You say, I need to see the entire compensation package. I need to see healthcare benefits. I need to see retirement benefits. I need to see vacation bonus opportunities. I need to see all this stuff. They're like, oh yeah, we can provide it for you. Good, good. After I see it in writing, I'll be happy to answer that question. I successfully dodged the question. Yeah, do not look at that. You have to know cost of living. You have to know commute, right? And some of these, they might even give you all the information running. Like, okay, listen, I got to go do some research to find out what the cost of living is and see if my family could afford to do this, to make sure it meets my retirement, my family obligation, my medical, all the other needs, right? Only when it's laid out in front of you can you really ascertain whether you can answer that question or not. But it depends. Yeah, don't answer that. Bad question. Okay? It's like throwing out a lure and you're like, oh, I'm like, I got one. Yeah, dirty tricks. Okay, that concludes our hour. Feel free to stop by my office anytime you like. We also talk about the job interview process in great depth, an entire week of it, in Software Engineering 1, CS 364. Okay, so don't feel this is your only opportunity.
Thank you, Brother Helfrich. So if you want to do a practice technical interview, signups are available at Sister Price's desk. We created 2 company personas. One of them is a defense company, another one's an internet company. They're fake, but they will set the theme for the questions that you will get, and we leave it up to the professors for their discretion as to what they will ask you. And so it's supposed to be, you know, a very rough and harrowing experience, because they're going to give you that critical interview type experience, or hopefully they will. So that way you won't be scarred for life after your first technical interview if you haven't done one yet. So that's what we're hoping for, and we're going to be putting up these posters for the upcoming party. We also have sent out emails for people to RSVP, but nobody has, only 3 people have RSVP'd, so I'd like people to RSVP. We'll send out another email explicitly asking for that. And that would be great. Are there any questions about the upcoming events and the interview marathon thing? Other than that, you're dismissed. Thank you for coming.